a retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the interview room on this Friday evening. So grateful that you're here. As you can tell, I have Dr. Gary Brucato in the house, Josh from the lab. If you haven't bought Dr. Brucato's book, or you know more than Dr. Brucato, write a book. If not, this is the new evil. It's an amazing book. He has the largest database in the world for mass murderers. And in fact, he's probably got, and you're going to have to add one today, Gary, with the latest shooting coming up in Arkansas.
Yep.
I'm working on a second edition book. It's a coloring book.
Absolutely. And he's not only a visiting scholar, but he's a internationally renowned speaker and known doctor of forensic psychology. So how's it going in New York there, Doc?
Very well. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm very much looking forward to talking a little bit about the Morin case because I feel that you and I were very personally involved in it, working, talking to the family and providing support and giving our sense of what this guy was going to be like and all that. And we assured them that he would be caught. And sure enough, here he is. And looks an awful lot like we envisioned him.
It's going to be really interesting to go over the material that we have tonight. And Josh Diaz is in the house from the lab. If you have not subscribed to the lab, please get over there, put your DNA, speaking of DNA, on his button over there that says subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell so you get all notifications. Brother Josh, how are you?
I'm well, Chris. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're absolutely welcome, and we're grateful that you are the producer of the Witness Box.
I am. And the Witness Box is a fantastic podcast, if I would say so myself. It really helps that you two bring your A game every single time, and it's a pleasure to be able to work with you guys and work on the post-production, pre-production, and it really is. It's a producer's dream to be able to work with people that know what they're talking about. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, well, we appreciate working with you as well, my friend. And tonight we want to thank each and every one of you that are just coming in here. If this is your first time here, we want to welcome you. If you've not subscribed, that's the only thing that we ask here at the interview room is that you hit, put your DNA on our button over here and subscribe to our channel. We want to thank always our subs and our members. And our Patreon members, we can't do any of this without you as well. But also our mods. We have Mimi J2, Maui Girl, Teresa M, and Laura. Without you ladies, we would be lost. I can tell you that, and they know that. They've been with me for the almost coming up into 4. We're into 3 years and something, and we're getting close. So without them, trust me, this channel would not be operating correctly. And of course, always in our thoughts and our prayers is Miss Sophia up in Canada. We sure miss her and sure love her as well. You're always in our prayers, Miss Sophia, if you're listening. So that said, tonight, man, oh man. Okay, first impressions, first thoughts. Morin's murderer in custody. I talked to the family. I brought it up the other day. Oh, and I should tell our audience, I'm going to do the other piece of Maddie's case on Sunday. I know I said I was going to do it tonight, but this just kind of popped up, and I thought you guys would want to hear some of our thoughts on this. And I've also got some documentation I want to show you that will drive the thoughts home that hopefully we share here. So that said, first impressions, and I'm going to start with Josh, if that's okay, Doc.
Sure.
First impressions of the case, when the case broke and there was a suspect, it's so unfortunate when you start to learn the details of these kinds of crimes, because these people that are being preyed upon are just going about their regular day, their regular business, exercising, just going on walks. And every time I hear about a crime like this, I always wonder if anybody has ever taken the time to just, Chris, I took the cold case class that helps you take away some of those bad situations that you put yourself in, or that people put themselves in. Now, don't get me wrong. Anybody should be able to go for a run at any time that they want, anywhere. Unfortunately, it's not the world that we live in anymore, and you have to be advantageous about your safety. And it's just a tragedy that people cannot just go for a walk or a run and live their lives without having to look over their shoulders or carry a taser or anything like that. But it is necessary, it seems, to these days.
All right. What say you, Doc?
First of all, I'm just so happy for the family that they'll begin to have some modicum of peace about this suspect being apprehended. And I think those of us with expertise in this area are pretty comfortable in saying that since this guy is accused of being a serial killer, because we know that he's accused of having killed in El Salvador, and in addition to Rachel, and Lord knows what his intentions were in the LA house, that he was stopped before he proceeded to kill again. One of the thoughts that keeps swimming around my head is, it's almost hard to believe that this guy really stopped and did nothing between Rachel's death and his apprehension. And I wait with a kind of chill in my bones for the things he's probably going to be linked to. And again, he is an awful lot like the kind of person we expected him to be, because there isn't too much under the sun when it comes to these kind of guys. And this one really checked off all the boxes of the kind of personality we would have expected, the kind of motive we would have expected, and I think the ferocious appetite that we expect. So I think it's going to be very interesting to go through what you have. But I think it's a good example of how profiling and law enforcement experience and forensic psychological experience work, and how you can really come up with a pretty amazingly good image of a person before they're ever even on the horizon. What are your thoughts about that, Chris?
Well, unfortunately, I think we've been dealing with this for quite some time. And I was asked recently on a program, it was Nancy Grace. She asked me, she goes, what are your thoughts in terms of this guy? Has he killed again? As well as, something to the effect of, is it going to surprise you if there's more? And you and I had talked behind the scenes, Dr. Brucato, that we both thought, no, that This may just be the tip of the iceberg now that they have his information deep into CODIS. We'll see what happens. Of course, we don't know that for sure until they do get a hit. But he laid low for 5 months right there in the Maryland area. So let me read something here. So the other day he appears for a hearing, right? An initial bail hearing. And so he shows up in the Harford County detention facility dressed in black and white. He was wearing a zebra suit, as we used to call him. And he was handcuffed behind his back, and he stood before Judge Kerwin A. Miller, who presided in courtroom number 1. He was there via Zoom, and he was read his charges, and he has 6 charges currently. Murder, first degree, which has a life sentence potential. It's a felony. Murder, second degree, felony, 40 years max. A rape charge, first degree, felony, life in prison. Rape, second degree, felony, 20 years max. An assault, first degree, felony, 25 years max. And an assault, second degree, which is a misdemeanor, 10 years max. And so what the district attorney has done here is he has stacked the charges for the jury. If they can't come to a first degree, they can look at a second. And if they can't come to a first degree, SA, they can look at a second. If they can't come to an assault, they can look at a second. So Judge Miller advised the defendant he had a right to a jury trial, et cetera, et cetera. The Morin family was present, and they were in attendance, and you can imagine how emotionally challenging that experience was for each of them to see the defendant for the very first time right in front of them on a video screen. During the statement, the charges were read, revealing new details about the case, which I will cover tonight because I have those charging documents. And it's always neat to see Buddy come in behind me, by the way, kind of breaking this up. This is such a horrific problem for just women all across the world. I can't imagine. I cannot imagine. There was an interpreter present, and there was a disclosure that Rachel had been beaten to death and found partially naked. DNA played a critical role identifying a possible relative for the suspect. And investigation into IgG, investigative genetic genealogy, a family line was developed, and a suspect had been discovered, meaning a family member within that line. And then PD learned, the sheriff's department learned that the guy they ended up arresting was staying with relatives in the Maryland area from December 23rd to May of 2024. December 23 to May of 24, and that the suspect had been reported leaving around May of 24, and the family provided the defendant's belongings to detectives who confirm a DNA match with Rachel. Let's talk DNA for a minute. What do you guys think about how much heat DNA takes? And it's going to be a big deal in the Kohberger case too. Would you guys agree to that? Or with that?
Yes, undoubtedly it's going to play into the Kohberger case.
So
yeah, well, Chris, DNA was once thought the gold standard in recent years, but it really does seem that people are really attacking DNA. But in situations like this, like with Rachel's crime and Kohberger being accused of doing what he did, it's going to be front and center. It's going to be the crux of the evidence in trial.
Interesting. Doc, do you want to take Jeanette's question real fast here? Do you think he's killed since Rachel? We know he killed before Rachel.
Well, if we think about the pattern of time between when he would have probably come to the United States after killing, we don't really know how much time there was before that. that he allegedly killed someone in El Salvador, but we do know the distance in time between the LA assault and the attack in Maryland, right? So if I'm remembering correctly, we're looking at like little under 6 months, right, Chris? That it was
Yeah.
LA, it was March. I think it was March. Correct me if I'm wrong, someone. So I had said on a previous episode that I thought that it probably wouldn't be more than 6 months before another assault, because you tend to see that kind of emboldening and that kind of increasing of the need for the stimulus, like a drug addicted person might experience. So I thought that there'd be something, by 6 months or less afterward. The timing suggests to me that there probably was some kind of offense, but that because he didn't have a clear MO, is not linked. It's going to take DNA, it looks like. And never in a million years without DNA would anybody have linked that home invasion in LA to that killing in Maryland. I mean, that's the miracle of DNA. But as we've talked about on the witness box at great length, you have to understand that we're living in a time when science and truth itself are attacked. And so now we're living in an era when even that gets attacked as questionable. You could have a person where the DNA profile says like there's like a 1 in a trillion chance that anybody else committed a crime, and they will actually go into the courtroom and argue with you that maybe you got that 1 in a trillion, and how could you convict somebody on that? It's quite amazing, but it all has to do with that philosophy of the time we're living in, when everything is up for grabs. Truth is not really knowable, as a consequence, why not question even that? And I think, in speaking about that at length, I think really got our fingers right on the pulse of a lot of what's wrong in the contemporary culture and the true crime world. And then, of course, there's some people that you could actually have photographs of the person committing the crime, and they still wouldn't believe you because they mistake being contrarian with being intelligent. That's a whole other story, which, I mean, we can go on about that too. But I think in this case, Chris, you'd agree. I mean, this is a pretty strong case.
Yeah, this is solid. Josh, what do you think?
Right.
What do you want to say?
Well, I was thinking when, the cops, the investigators, the people that collect the evidence, they all get put on trial in these kinds of cases mostly. And it really, the blueprint really started in the OJ trial, when, truth is not really the truth. The truth is what we twist it into. And just the brazen attack on others, and I know that people say, DNA, solid DNA is a lot of times, unfortunately, and I don't think that it'll happen in this case, but sometimes a judge will make a baffling decision about DNA that will throw a case into chaos. And it happens more often than people would think. And anything can happen at a jury trial. We've all seen it go sideways many times. There are certain trials that are going on now where it is very popular to attack the agencies investigating these crimes, and it's really their trial. And so I don't see that happening in this case, but it happens quite a bit.
So let's take a look, and I appreciate those comments, guys. Let's take a look at the first of all, this is the arrest warrant for our guy, or for their guy. Okay. And so I'm going to go over this with everybody. Hopefully you haven't seen this, but if you have, I'm going to make sense of it. So this is an arrest warrant for him, and it was issued on I think the 14th of June. I'll get down to that, but I think it was issued on the 14th of June. Yep, there it is. Court ordered June 14, 2024, for his arrest. Now, this is what went to the Oklahoma, and there's a couple other agencies that were involved in this. We talked about them on another program. HIDA was involved, which is high impact drug trafficking. I'm still curious as to why they're in the loop here. My guess was, and I said it on Nancy Grace, they had prior contacts with this guy, and lo and behold, we're learning that he had been deported at least 3 separate times in Texas. So that means, it doesn't mean though that they had his bio information. They used to stop them at the Honduras-Guatemalan border. We have an HSI headquarters down in Central America that would stop any flow coming to the U.S. And what they do is they use biometric goggles. They take their photographs, they take their biometrics on their eyes, they take fingerprints, they take potentially a swab, a DNA buccal swab. All that information goes in, but those programs were canceled for 2 reasons. One, arguments with Mexico and Central America countries, and of course, other things. I don't know what it is, but that's what I know to be a truth statement. So this goes into Interpol at that point then. And what Interpol does is they put a red alert on this guy. And what that is a document like this, but they get a hit through NCIC on his name. That's the National Crime Information Center. And what happens at that point, that links to Interpol. And the red alert came up that, hey, El Salvador is also looking for a guy with the exact same name, the exact same date of birth for a murder down here. And I'm learning that is also a young girl through my sources. So that will come out at some point, but you heard it here first. Hopefully you're seeing this here first. But, as Dr. Brucato and I like to say, it's not our first rodeo, and Josh knows we've been around the block a couple of weeks. I've been dealing with this problem since I started in Southern California in law enforcement in 1982. And here we are in 2024, and we're still dealing with the same problem. That said, this information goes in to NCIC, and there's a brief paragraph of probable cause. And I want to give you a trigger warning, everybody. It's horrific of what happened to Rachel. It is absolutely horrific. And I am always sensitive to her children, as is Dr. Brucato, as is Josh, her family. The victims come first here on the interview room. So I'm going to read some of it and then kind of summarize parts of it as well. So you're going to get all the information, but at the same time, you will get the messaging pretty clear as to what had taken place with this sweet human being. So the lead detective in this is a guy by the name of Detective Golden. And here's the case number and all of the statement of charges. And what this is it just tells the court and the arresting agency and Interpol, if they would have got him there, that this is what we're looking for. This is the guy that we're looking for. And these are the charges that we believe he committed. First degree murder, did willfully and without deliberate premeditation, malice aforethought, kill and murder Rachel Morin. And of course, we have the second degree again, the same thing, same verbiage. The second charge is SA, first degree, and he did commit it upon Rachel. And there was the penal code section there under, code section 3-303. And then the second degree, and then the assault. And then we get down here to a brief narrative. This is, again, the detective who is the affiant for this arrest warrant. So if you guys are in the area of the Hartford County Sheriff's Office, go buy this guy a dozen donuts and drop them off in the lobby. He and his team deserve it. We used to love that working when in homicide. Citizens would just show up with, what we call cop rolls and their donuts. And, if you could put them on your tires on your car, you would.
What was your favorite?
Dude, you put a donut in front of me, it's my favorite.
Okay, gotcha.
Dr. Brucato, what's your favorite?
I'm a fritter guy myself.
I have to say that I am not a fan of most of that kind of stuff, but if you put them in front of me, first of all, I tend to eat the munchkins. I like the munchkins.
Oh, you're a donkey guy, huh?
I do like munchkins from Dunkin', and I like the idea that they're what's left when you make the donut hole. There's something about that fascinates me, and I do tend to like the jelly. I'm not sure why exactly, I'm
Strikes
that
me as
guy.
a jelly guy.
Yeah, I'm that guy that when you're eating them, and you're
Is this a filled one? Is this a filled one? Does this have filling in it? That's you.
No, I'm that
You're
guy.
gonna have to bite into it to find out. Is it too heavy?
It's worse than that. I'm the guy that tells you how many blocks you're gonna have to walk to burn it while you're eating it.
I love it. I love it. And
You
you see,
have to walk 80 blocks to burn that, and then I'm like, But
and you see, chat, if this is your first time here, this is what the interview room's all about. We kind of keep it light, but very serious on this side, on a professional side. But you're going to laugh too at the same time because, everybody needs donuts. And now that we know that Dr. Brucato is a Dunkies guy, a Munchkin guy, and Josh is a fritter guy, I'll leave it just at that place. All right. So now we get into the narrative.
we're obviously, Chris, trying to insert a moment of levity because this is going to be so painful to
Absolutely.
to be clear.
100%.
It's like an avoidance tactic, because this is really painful.
Yeah, and when I was in homicide, you never knew what you would come back to your desk because your peers were trying to break the seriousness of the totality of all the circumstances, and that was one of those moments there for all of us. So, and of course, each and every one of you in the chat, this stuff is heavy sometimes. It's very heavy sometimes. And when you read stuff like this, it gets even heavier. So August 5th, Rachel Anna Morin was reported missing by her boyfriend, Richard Tobin. Tobin advised that Morin had gone for a walk on the Ma and Pa Trail earlier in the evening and never returned home. Morin's car was found at the trail parking lot, the William Street entrance in Bel Air. Later the next afternoon, Morin was located deceased a short distance from the parking lot and just off the trail in a wooded area. Now picture mom, her sister, her daughter, her brother, her family, all 5 of her children, her husband, her ex-husband, having to hear this in a courtroom. That's what just happened the other day. And kudos to the family attorney, Mr. Rice. He's doing an amazing job representing the Morin family, and they're arm in arm with law enforcement. A message to the district attorney: do not, I repeat, do not go on any YouTube channels as a guest before the trial. Don't do that. Okay? It has crazy repercussions. Just look up Suzanne Morphew's attorney who's getting in trouble. That said, Morin was located deceased a short distance from the parking lot and just off the trail in a wooded area. And I won't be inviting that DA, for the record. There were signs that Morin had been beaten to death and essayed. Morin was partially naked with her sports bra pulled up over her top and her shorts were pulled down to her ankles. Forensic evidence swabs were collected from multiple areas of Morin's body, including her private areas, and later processed, at which time it was determined there was genetic material from unknown male inside of her body. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner determined her death to be homicide. During the course of the investigation, forensic evidence, to include unknown genetic material and DNA, was recovered from multiple areas of Morin's body. Genetic profile was generated and the samples and indicated that they were all from the same male contributor. This is a good time to stop and talk about the special that's coming up with Ann Burgess. Dr. Brucato is seen in some of these chapters or programs. It's on Hulu. And I don't know if you know Dr. Burgess, but she's going to be on our show next Sunday night, not this Sunday, but next Sunday night. She is a legend. And I mean a legend. She was the doctor who was inserted into the FBI's behavior science unit. And she created all the protocols, collecting, meaning how to organize the data to catch these types of individuals. This work that you're seeing right in front of us is a direct result of Dr. Ann Burgess. And I am just honored to have Ann back here next Sunday with Gary, and we have assembled an amazing panel to honor her upcoming show that is about her, and which led to many, many movements within this country. And you're not going to want to miss it, trust me. And then I'm going to encourage you to watch the show Mastermind on Hulu coming up, I think, in July.
So July 11th, Chris.
July 11th.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the type of people that we're talking here with, obviously, Dr. Brucato, who's written The New Evil, these people are in a different league. It's a different league. And it's insulting sometimes to see people who know nothing talk about people who know a lot and have spent their entire lives, even in the room with Ted Bundy and many others. So this, by reading this, I think it's important to recognize that Ann was a pioneer in laying these types of information out. Okay, let's see here. Family lineage led to the identification, so they went and did IgG, and then they went and interviewed his family members. Now, remember, we heard from the FBI. It was in two places, in Maryland and in El Salvador. And as you remember, when we first talked about this, even the three of us, I said that this guy was probably from Central America, and that I'd even mentioned that Guatemala was in play, El Salvador, Belize, all of these Central America countries. Venezuela at the time, they're all in play. And lo and behold, he is from El Salvador. And there was a couple of reasons for that. Remember, people were saying, no, he's in the military. We had true crimers out there on other channels. He's got to be from a military base or whatever. No, the neighborhood that he was in South Central Los Angeles is the 77th Division of LAPD, and that's Buddy. And what the reason it was so important to help understand the dynamics of that neighborhood where he attacked the young girl was, if you go into that neighborhood and you're not from that neighborhood, your risk level goes very, very high about potentially being, what we call DLR, doesn't look right.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that while we're talking about it, Gary, Josh?
I think you covered it.
Okay. So anyway, the family stated that Victor Hernandez had left around the beginning of May 24, and he'd never returned. But he was in Maryland staying with them from December 23 to May of 24. So he leaves. Detectives asked, did he have any belongings? And the family provided detectives with 2 bags of clothing and a pair of shoes. DNA swabs were recovered from some of these items and processed at the Maryland State Forensics Lab. At that time, the lab had advised that DNA recovered from the clothing identified by family to Victor Hernandez matched the DNA recovered from the crime scene. Okay. And so that's what went into the warrant. Detective Philip Golden signed it. The judge signed it, and it went into the National Crime Information Center. Okay, thoughts on this, guys?
It seems incredibly difficult to track these kinds of criminals down. I mean, you're getting alerts from El Salvador, and I think that once they're able to collect, a DNA sample to test it against, others, but it just it is such a process, and it's almost like hunting a ghost for a very long time. That's kind of what I get from it.
Doc?
Well, what jumps out at me is that there really wasn't much effort made to prevent capture by this offender. It was totally impulsive. It was ferocious, and he didn't care what he left behind. It's very interesting about these kind of people is that I think sometimes they're so used to feeling invisible that they forget that they're not. They're so the whole point of these crimes is to compensate for feeling invisible, and they forget that even these little microscopic unseen things will lead to their capture. And there's sort of weird poetry in that. But so that I think there's that sort of sloppy quality there, and I also think an arrogance that is glimpsed there, and I'm glad that was the undoing of this offender. Wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yeah, and what's important to understand, and Linda, this is a great question or a comment. Wow, so the Maryland family handed over the bag of clothing with DNA. I wonder what he did to make them finally turn him in. I don't think they turned him in as much as the PD probably tracked him and found him. There were a couple of things I think that were very key to this, and then we don't know exactly yet, but listen to the press conference very carefully when the FBI SAC got up in there. He's a special agent in charge. That's what they call it, SAIC. And when the SAC gets up there and he identifies himself as the guy in the area, he said technology, FBI was able to technologically get involved, and we pinpointed his location. So basically they helped through some technology pin him down. My gut tells me they pinged his phone. You know how you can, the app Find My Phone, and you know where that phone is? I think they probably got a search warrant from Apple because they probably had his phone number, and they went in and hit that phone.
Yeah, isn't Apple, and aren't they pretty strict about turning that stuff over too?
Yeah, they're very strict about it, but they may have used one of the family members' phones.
Yeah.
And he may have been part of that plan, because remember, the guy had a cell phone in his pocket leaving the house in LA. Remember, you could see it glowing in his pocket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we don't know for sure, but that is also another probability that, they went to the family members and said, look, here we go, let's go. And you know, a lot of times, and I'm going to do a show on this where this, you guys know which one I'm talking about, with this one here, okay, where you'll see up here where it says at the top, knife wielding and blood money, use blood money to get home. Well, this is my case, and this was a couple of weekends ago. I think I was like 14 when I investigated this one. Anyway, I'm teasing, but this is Mauricio Hernandez and his brother. I arrested both of these guys, and I'm going to talk about that on a show coming up here. I'm putting it together. And what we needed was the cooperation from the family to make this thing.
And they're not really all that willing. I mean, it's kind of as you know, my family is Hispanic, and my dad had 9 brothers and sisters, and some of them committed crimes, and they're not that willing to talk a lot of the times, and it can be a cultural thing where they stick together until it's like, you know, till there is repercussions kind of for everybody. But I mean, it's really been that way for a long time, and I know that I've seen it happen in my own family before a few different times on my father's side.
Yeah, and one of the things then you have to take into account is if this guy had gang affiliation with, you know, El Salvador gangs, which they're saying that he did. We don't know, you know, what it is in totality, but that would also make sense as to why he blended in South Central Los Angeles. If he's MS-13, then he'll blend right in, and nobody would have even questioned him in South Central LA. Okay. But if the family knew about him, which obviously they did, and they turned over information to the PD, a lot of times you can just tell the family, hey, there's a reward. And either you give him up, or we're going to tell the authorities down in El Salvador. Okay. And you can certainly know that you can make a lot of money quickly in El Salvador, especially if law enforcement down there is looking for a couple of bucks, extra money on the side. And so that's a pretty scary, you know, situation for families to be in. You know, and sometimes it's a bluff, sometimes it's reality. Okay? Because you're looking for a guy who's already murdered 2 people. And so the law allows you to bluff the family. And maybe that was some of the tactics they used. I don't know. I can certainly tell you we have in the past, my 13 years in homicide, to break through that barrier that you just mentioned, Josh, to get through that barrier.
Yeah.
Okay. And so.
And people have a sense of duty and responsibility to cooperate, regardless of, you know, family affiliations or things like that. I mean, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the old Bass Reeves U.S. Marshal who tracked his own son down for murder. He actually went to the courthouse and said, "Give me that warrant. He's my son," and that was his job. That's what he did for a living. He tracked down fugitives, and this was in the late 1800s. And he said he turned his own son in. And the kid went to Leavenworth, and you know, it because he was a lawman. You know, he appreciated and respected the law. And I'm not saying that that's not the case here. I'm just saying that we all would have a duty to do that, to cooperate.
Yeah, this is another great point. You know, his parents could have already been afraid of him, right? Even them, and that's a possibility as well. No question about it. That's a great concept. And AF, yes, to answer your question, both Dr. Brucato and myself felt that this guy was on the trail, had been waiting on the trail, and had concealed himself to where it would have been a blitz type of attack. And that's essentially what had taken place here. We also said that he was from out of this country. And our fear was, when we talked about that weeks ago, even months ago, and we talked about it behind the scenes with the family, that my fear was, and if you'll watch one of the shows I did, I said the authorities need to make sure they have an Article 4 warrant lined up, just in case this guy had gotten over there. We'll come to find out the guy had come through 3 separate times. And as a result of that, they didn't have any biometrics on him. They just had a contact and release. And so that's why this next clip that I'm going to show you, I have a real couple of interesting questions about it. And this is a news article real fast. And remember, I talked about transporting these guys back, that we would go down because we were on the border there in San Diego County, where we could just go to the Customs Border Patrol. They had jets, they have, aircraft, etc. We fly all around the country. Well, guess how they brought him in? Those guys. And I'm going to show you that piece of the puzzle as well. I've got a video of that. Here we go. But I'm going to stop this because, Gary, what was one of your predictions, how this guy's getting around?
Well, I predicted that he was getting around with buses, and that I had suggested to the family members, but the last time we were on together, that they go to the bus stop that was nearest the LA home and ask if they recognize this guy, and they could look at, law enforcement could look at the security cameras, because I imagine this guy was darting all over the country by bus, where you didn't need any ID, and that was based on my sense that he might have been here illegally. It is unfortunate that turned out to be true. But you have some info about his transportation in the document?
Yeah, in the search warrant that they did on Tulsa, they found a variety of things, including bus tickets and Metro fare cards, which would indicating he was using the public transportation system as well as the bus. And by the way, I'm going to give a shout out to JLR Investigates. If you want to see what's going on over there, he's down there right now at the border, and he's taking live video and putting it up. If you have not seen him, I have nothing against the guy at all. Okay? I think he's a hard worker, and he's out there doing things that other people in the YouTube community aren't doing. But good for him. God bless him. That he's safe. But if you want to see some of the stuff that's going on, that guy is boots on the ground, man. And I gotta admire that personally. But
yeah, his coverage of the border is fascinating. I mean, he's right in the middle.
He was even there when Dr. Phil showed up, I think. And the president. I mean, it was like, does this guy? I love it. I just love it. So anyway, there you go. So I'm going to show you this. This is a news clip, of the news station, a Fox station in Oklahoma.
Behind bars.
And tonight, Fox 45 News continues to dig deeper into Victor Martinez-Hernandez's arrest and his past criminal history.
We have live team coverage starting with Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor.
She joins us with more on the additional cases he's facing, charges, and the possibility of more to come. Rebecca?
Yeah, Mary and Kai, from incidents happening clear across the country to even outside of the U.S., Rachel Morin, suspected killer, is wanted on several other crimes, all of them extremely violent in nature, which is causing some law enforcement experts to question whether or not more victims could soon surface.
Gary, is there any question that more victims will surface from your perspective?
Let's put it this way. It's extremely likely that there was certainly, it probably were attempts. Completed acts, I would suspect, but we don't know. And my guess is because of the absence of a clear MO and the randomness and impulsivity of how this guy operates, and that there's no clear victimology. They're just not being tied yet. But given how sloppy he was, in terms of not really doing a good job covering things up at the Monpont Trail in this horrendous crime, you can bet that he would have left traces of himself in multiple places if there are multiple attacks, and it's just a matter of time until they're linked. But the guy was all over the place. That bolo that you have, by the way, Chris, mentioned states that so far have no clear link to this guy, but they're there. If you have that poster to put up, I mean, we can look at the states it says we're involved. There are states there where right now we're all scratching our heads of why they're mentioned, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
The states where he's present. So what's that about? Is there more to the story? Do they know the path he took? And I guess that'll all be recreated, or hopefully they'll get it from him.
Or yeah, exactly. They'll get it from him. By my understanding, he is talking. And, about that other guy I just mentioned, the JLR, I'm no respecter of persons. And as the scripture said, whosoever hath not sinned, let them cast the first stone. Okay. Stop casting stones. You know what? I love the guy's work. I watch it. I don't know about you. I don't take it personally, and neither should you, in my opinion, but that's up to you. Completely up to your life, not mine. That said, let's move on.
The lengthy search for a Harford County murder suspect ending halfway across the country. A search warrant uncovered by Fox 45 News revealing Victor Martinez-Hernandez was believed to be renting this brick home in Tulsa, Oklahoma. 10 months after the brutal beating of Rachel Morin, her suspected killer reportedly living in a densely populated suburb, just a short drive from several schools, churches, and the airport. Following his arrest at a bar just down the street, Tulsa police searching the residence for knives and other deadly weapons.
Okay, so here they're looking at weapons that could cause death, clothing, masks, cellular and smart devices, knives, jewelry. The question is, whose jewelry? Notes, writings, drawings. Any of these items belong to Rachel.
Instead, investigators
Laptop.
finding a laptop, sketchbook, and a driver's registration from his.
Now, this one, what do you guys think about this top reference here of what they recovered? FBI business card. I think they were sniffing this guy. They were on it. And they just didn't have the links. Yeah, they at the time they probably went to the house, put their business card on him. Give me a call. But they didn't have. Go ahead.
About what time, into the investigation, do you think that they started to track him?
Well, that's a great question. Yeah, we don't know yet, right? It takes, if they did rapid DNA, it also takes weeks and weeks to, get the IgG going and get those results back. Sometimes even months, depends on the caseload. But look at this. So the feds were sniffing the door, as I call it. Okay. They were sniffing the door.
The alleged home country of El Salvador. Also, bus tickets and a
bus tickets right there, Gary. But here's the interesting part. 2 of them, parentheses, 2, a Metro card. So is that from where to where, right? Are these not used? Are they receipts? Was he about ready to, skip Dodge again? I think this is going to be really interesting. The sketchbook and the sketch pad. What say you, Gary?
Listen, it's funny because I had said when we were creating a profile of this guy that I imagined him to be intensely visual. And like a lot of these predatory men who could really imagine himself like a hunter into a scene and know exactly where to. And a lot of them, because they're so visual, particularly the sexually motivated ones, they do tend to be artistic or to depict or try to record things or plot things out and so forth. They're not particularly good verbally, usually. We're seeing that, for example, in the Rex Heuermann bail document. Problems with the visual, but this was an extremely visual guy, an architect, actually. something about that is very interesting to me. But anyway, also what interested me about this is maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that MetroCard refers specifically to the card that's sold in New York City for the subways. I don't know if the term MetroCard is used for cards for metros and other parts of the country. If anyone knows, please let me know, because as soon as I saw this, I thought, was this guy in New York at some point? Was he headed to New York? What, did somebody get him a MetroCard that he could use when he arrived? I just was curious, but I think that term, even when you Google it, which I did earlier, it says MetroCard is a New York thing. And that's interesting to me. New York is not mentioned on the list of states of activity, Chris, right, on the BOLO?
Right. No. And also, Stephen, this is what came from Tulsa. This is from the search warrant in Tulsa. So you know. I hope that helps, my friend.
Yeah, Karen in the chat says that Tulsa has MetroLink buses.
Oh, excellent. So it's in other words, they call them Metro cards, just like we do in New York?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so that makes a lot more sense to me, because of saying, what's the tie to New York? So he's getting around locally. He rented a place there, right, Chris? He was actually living there. He rented a home.
Right, he was staying there.
Settled down in Oklahoma.
Yeah, he'd been yeah.
And thank you, Karen, for that important piece of information. So
go ahead.
So, Chris, you want to tell the audience your thought about how he was making a living?
Sure, but just before I do that, Josh, what are your
sure.
thoughts? No, that's all right. With the list that you're seeing here, any thoughts that come to you, buddy?
I mean, obviously, what stands out is the bus tickets and the way that he was traveling, like Dr. Gary had talked about. It's basically untraceable way to travel. The FBI business cards are quite a shock to see as well. But the sketch pad does not surprise me. I mean, there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of people that tend to either spend a lot of time by themselves or aren't really social and can't be social for certain reasons. Sort of a lot of them turn to art, and a lot of them are very, very talented. So that doesn't surprise me. But the bus ticket and the FBI business card, it really is what sticks out.
Yeah, and this is not the suspect's writing. This is the detective that executed the search warrant. Just for chat, so everybody knows. Okay, if you're just joining with us. Okay, let's keep moving.
Metro card, seemingly from his many travels in the last year. 6 months before Morin's murder, DNA evidence connecting Hernandez to a home invasion and assault on a 9-year-old girl.
Okay, now here is when so what do you guys think about that so far? Now we've got a Fed card, we've got Metro bus tickets, 2 of them. We've got a MetroLink card. He's got a sketch pad. Gary, would it surprise you when they open up all his digital devices that he doesn't have photographs of his victims post and, during or, after? And would it surprise you if he'd sketched out, if he's going through this fantasy, if he sketched out some of the stuff? Thoughts on that?
None of these things would surprise me, because, as I said, these types of offenders are very visual and they're very fantasy oriented. So the whole idea is that whether it's drawing or imagining, like Sam Little could draw out his victims, of whom there were 93, totally from memory, right? And I remember once I was discussing with a great expert on serial sexual homicide, Vernon Gayberth, who we're big fans, Vernon. And I remember talking to him about, what do you think people did in the day, these men did in the days before there were photographs and film and so forth to record this stuff? And we talked about how they probably did a lot of drawing, because they need that visual stimulation, that it's planning it out, toying with ideas, bringing it to life, sort of the way a director plots out the scenes, all of that. So there's going to be some way that he was visually doing this, and who knows? Could be photographs, could be all here in his head, could be sketches, but could be nothing. But usually there's something. Certainly mementos, things like that.
So how does he spring load from a young girl to 37-year-old woman?
I think the point is that it's opportunistic, and he really couldn't care less as long as it's a female. I think the point is that he has such an appetite, an animal appetite, and an overarching misogyny that simply being female is all he needs. And that's why I still insist. I could be wrong, but I've always insisted when we created a kind of profile, a sketch of him, that he basically set up an ambush like a spider, and the first woman that went by, he attacked. I really don't think he stalked a specific victim. That's a different type of serial killer.
So you think that he could have just been waiting in that ditch, or near the?
I think he just waited in that turn for someone to come around. And my sense is, look, there are some serial killers that need a highly specific victim in terms of body type. For example, we mentioned Herman earlier. If Herman is guilty, he clearly liked tiny women. Even in his bail document, it says small is good, right? Remember that whole thing? He liked that type. Yeah. Whether that was because they were like children, or because they were easy to manipulate or control or dominate, or they reminded him of somebody, who knows? And so that's the kind of offender, or like Ted Bundy, who it's like they have to go out looking for someone to cast, to project some prototype, as I've called it, onto that person. And those are the people, incidentally, who come closest to the etymology of the word victim, which comes from a word that means an innocent person who pays the price for some other person, right? That person is the sacrifice that's paying the price for the original person you're mad at. That's a different kind of serial killer. Then there's the kind of serial killer that is just hungry, that will take absolutely, they're misanthropic, they hate the whole group, and they'll just kill anyone that meets even the most basic criteria. And that kind of person tends, in my experience, to be sloppier, to be less meticulous, less organized, more impulsive, basically, like on the run, just kind of meeting their needs and then jumping on to the next town, that kind of thing. I mean, Chris, wouldn't you say he's got that quality of like we see in those, like Tommy Linsells, or one of these kind of transient, nasty, angry people? And I had also said when we created this picture of him that this guy was extremely angry. I think, Rachel, for him, the one thing I think that did matter about her in the victimology for him psychologically is that she sort of emblematized everything that he wasn't and that he couldn't have. Privilege, whiteness, white privilege, one might say, right? Attractiveness, wanted by the world, belonging in the United States, probably loved by people, etc. And I have always said, home invaders do tend to come across to me as people who are deeply envious of people who have happy, normal homes. So I had said from the beginning, probably not from here, probably never belonged anywhere, probably never had anybody, in a home that cared about him, etc. And, look, Chris, it is interesting to think about why family members gave that stuff over. And why did he leave it? Does that mean that
we're learning that he also has a 3-year-old child.
I didn't hear that. Where did you hear that?
Trust me, I know. I got that. Yeah, he's got a 3-year-old child. Where that kid is, we don't know. I think the kid's in El Salvador, but there's a 3-year-old child.
That breaks my heart, Chris, to hear that.
I know. Yeah, that it's going to be, again, things are going to be being uncovered soon.
Yeah,
so,
it feels kind of like there's going to be an avalanche of other things coming out, crimes that they're going to be able to
probably.
I mean, and this is just me speculating, but I don't think this guy woke up one day and was like, okay, I'm just going to do this, but because we already found out that he had committed murder in somewhere else, and I mean,
in January 23, Josh, in January 23, and Gary, let's answer this question first here. It says from Marlene, and thank you, Marlene, for always being with us. We sure appreciate you very much. Thank the man above that he didn't, but why end Rachel's life and the life of women in his country, but not the 9-year-old?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I think the only reason things went the way they did in that house is that he was booted out by the son of the woman whose daughter was also being attacked. And but we have absolutely no idea how that would have gone. Remember that if you look in the New Evil, this guy would fall into the same category as Richard Ramirez, category 7.
Which number would he be, this
17,
guy?
because there was no torture. So he's a serial killer who was sexually motivated and eliminated victims almost certainly just because they were witnesses or because he had too much force.
His motive isn't murder.
Sexual. He's a sexually sadistic guy. And my guess is, Chris, that he killed at least once. You know, he's right on target for the age when you'd expect it to start. He had some kind of sexual perversion, paraphilia, whatever, probably had the classic progression. And then he bolts. And, he tries a few times to stick around here. Finally, something sticks. And he goes right back to his behaviors. He's a sexual compulsive, who has total disdain for women. And the other thing that's a big clue about him, I've said from the beginning, he attacked in the dark when people were sleeping. He attacked a woman jogging from behind. What does that tell you? That if you saw this guy, he would probably be little and pathetic, insecure, not able to control them. But in the darkness and from behind, he could be whatever he imagined. So my sense is that I had predicted that he was going to be kind of a small, insecure guy, the kind of guy.
Wait till you see him.
Yeah, just like a little kind of a pathetic nothing and a coward, who had to take unfair shots at people, when they were vulnerable.
So he's a 17?
17 in the scale, yeah, which means he never would have stopped. And those people have ferocious appetites. They could keep going and going and going if they're not caught. Sometimes even years and years and years, and they tend to be kind of on a spree. I mean, they just go from place to place. It gives them a godlike feeling that they're everywhere at the same time. And they're random. If you were to look at all the different Ramirez cases, you would see that certainly home invasion was a common feature. There was the common feature of like a couple of instances of satanic markings that he would leave or whatever. But otherwise, he would use whatever was around. I mean, some people were beaten, some were stepped on, crushed. One was electrocuted for a kind of torture, bludgeoned, assaulted.
Telephone wire.
Yeah, telephone wire. A child, and stuck in a closet. It was just husband shot in bed. It was just a frenzy of hatred and anger, and I think unfortunately that's what you're dealing with this guy. So it would be very hard without DNA to link him. And
here's a question for you, Gary. Do these people secretly hope to get caught?
I don't think so. It would stop their favorite pastime. Incidentally, just as a bit of trivia, which I bet people will find very interesting. When I was writing about Richard Ramirez, a similar kind of offender, actually, in the New Evil, I learned that he actually would have been caught a lot sooner were it not for Dianne Feinstein. Do you remember Dianne Feinstein?
Yes.
Okay. So it's very, very, she passed away now, but it's very interesting because what had happened was the police identified the pattern of shoe, the distinct sneaker pattern that he had left on a victim from stomping her. And they were using that to try to find this guy through, the manufacturer of the sneaker, where he got it, whatever. And she went on television and told everyone that this lead had happened. And it blew the whole thing. He literally saw it on the news, took the shoes and threw them into the river.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he threw them off a bridge. And he went on and on and on killing. And I think there's a lesson to be learned from that about why you keep things under your hat. And I have to say, Chris, I was very impressed by the police work in this case and the way they kept things under their hat, and they didn't mess around. I would defy someone to find a fault in their police work here. It was beautifully done, elegant, I would say. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, it was great. No
Elegant.
doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and credit goes where credit deserves to be given.
It was wonderful. They were really elegant, and
You know,
and
I'm
I
sure
think
people will grift off of it.
Well,
in terms of
I was going to say,
criticizing.
I was going to say,
It's
don't
okay.
issue that challenge because somebody will inevitably take you up on that.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
but I
Dr.
agree.
Brucato said. Here's a great question too from Carol Ann. How do you think he's going to behave in jail?
well, this is not a particularly sophisticated guy, and he's sort of a nothing when you actually look at him and probably experience him. And I think he'll probably have a very hard time in jail, will be my sense. I think he'll be very afraid, kind of picked on, not particularly popular. Wouldn't you say, Chris? He's not exactly a scary guy. He's sort of a nothing. And I mean, you tell me, but and I also think that this appetite is not really going to go away, and there'll be a lot of imagining and kind of perverse stuff. Don't be surprised if some pen pal falls madly in love with him and develops one of these hybristophilic relationships with him, and they have conjugal visits, and the whole thing certainly happened to Ramirez more than once.
Right.
So it happens to a lot of these guys. I always said if I were somebody who committed capital crimes and went to jail, I'd probably be the first offender who didn't have hybristophilic fans who came to the jail. That they'd be like, all right, the buck stops here.
Josh and I would come visit you, Gary. We would come visit,
on a very different.
and we would send some YouTube fans over as well. To get on the list to get in there to see you.
I would visit him, but I don't know.
Right, but that'd be the end of it. Otherwise, But all joking aside, I just think that he is going to be kind of revealed for what he is in jail. The other thing I'm interested in is if he has any gang affiliations, and he might be protected in jail by other members of whatever gangs he was affiliated with.
That is a great point.
Confused about their vague references to gang affiliation. Chris, did it sound to you from the presentation? That's hilarious. From that talk that was given, the announcement of the capture, did it sound that he was in a gang or that he had some?
Well, they said he had gang affiliations. Now, I don't know what that means, right? But if he is in a gang and he's from El Salvador, obviously the first choice is, I think anybody is going to say, is MS-13.
Oh yeah,
right. And you see, Doc, everybody will come visit you
And bring me munchkins. Yeah.
Well, then you don't need us.
Bring you munchkins. I love it.
It'll be like when the woman wanted to marry Manson so that when he died, she could show his mummified body for money.
Oh my goodness!
Remember that? She wanted to marry Manson so she could show him off when he.
Yeah, put him out there for the world. There are some sick puppies in this world. I mean, let's
I know.
let's just
I mean, listen.
I thought I've seen everything.
I walk down the street, it's like a menagerie of of interesting people.
Man, I can't talk about the case, but where I'm at, I went to visit a guy in jail, and I was like, really? And it's like, yeah, I'm going, holy cow, man. I don't know where it's going to go, but so go ahead, Josh. Say what you're going to say.
Said that they would bake you a cake with a file in it.
Bake you a cake with a file. Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're going to hear Bundy data, right? We're going to hear more about this because this is, and we don't know if there's more than one. I mean, he may have done this one, but there was pre-incident behavior before he killed that gal in El Salvador. So there's going to be a lot of SA assaults down there that probably the authorities may or may not even have the sophistication to document them, to be honest with you.
I think we can make an educated guess that even though they're talking about a murder in El Salvador, it was probably a sex crime.
Yeah.
I think it's very clear. I mean, the motivation here is aggressive sexual assault. The other thing is we didn't get into why Rachel appears to have been beaten, and Lord knows what else. I think it was part of a process of blitzing her to knock her out and render her, because I think, again, consistent with this guy's personality, he doesn't care if you're asleep, not, whatever. The whole thing is like, for his fantasy, he needs to dominate with you not putting up any kind of fight or seeing him or whatever. And, look, it's possible that part of the DNA they're referring to all over Rachel is that she was fighting him. I mean, I hope she was. I hope she clocked him a few times. But the thing is, there may have been DNA under the nails. There could have been defensive wounds. There could have, I mean, what do you think, Chris? Because they refer to there being DNA,
all over her body.
So I think she must have put up a fight.
I do too. And thank goodness, because, I love that comment from the sheriff during the press conference, on the day of her birthday, maybe she's working from the other side, almost divine intervention. I just thought that was such a powerful statement. Because you, Josh, and I mean, we've all talked about, how we feel that those who have been, violently taken off of this earth can assist if you just listen and pay attention and kind of feel sometimes. But so let's go over this real fast. Go ahead, Josh. Well,
and that's what medical examiners, forensic medical examiners, and just detectives in general do so well, is that they do tell the story for somebody who can't talk, that unfortunately Rachel's body and her injuries and her ultimately fighting back will have helped solve this crime. And God bless her. I can't imagine the fear.
Yeah. And so let's kind of just do a high level run here. January 23, he kills a woman in El Salvador, allegedly where he's from. In February, he crosses into the U.S. twice, in El Paso and then once in New Mexico. He's found and booted from the country at that time. March of 23, he crosses again into the U.S., again in New Mexico. He gets caught again and booted out. Later in March of 23, he crosses in the U.S. a fourth time, and at this time he remained undetected. However, in March of 26, in 23, he shows up in L.A., and that's where he does the home invasion, attacking the mother and the 9-year-old in the house, and he's booted out of the house by the older brother. But he leaves behind a hat and water bottle. LAPD get it. They throw it into CODIS, and boom, they get the hit. It's sitting there. August 5th, he attacks and kills Rachel on the Ma and Pa Trail in Bel Air. So, Gary, I mean, this guy, he's on the move from January, February, March, and all the way up into August. I mean, he is just
great. That's what I'm saying. These types, it's like a bender. And, Chris, it's very interesting because, and maybe I'm too much of a pattern former, but the common denominator thematically in the three important layers of this story: invading the border, invading a house, invading a woman's body.
Yeah.
The common denominator is invasion, entitlement and invasion. And that, where does one get a sense of entitlement to invade? Well, of course, from feeling that they've been cheated out of any place that is their rightful place where they belong, or that they have a right to, or whatever. So you have to deduce from that a person who comes from some unpredictable, cold, ungiving kind of home and is angry at the world, probably rejected by women, who now has developed a sense of entitlement about them too, furious at them for some reason that's only going to make sense when we understand this guy's psychology. And Chris, at the end of the day, all that psychoanalysis off the table, he also is just a sexually perverse offender who has a paraphilic appetite where he doesn't care about women at all except as objects to invade and use. And he would have kept doing that. And so I have to say we need to be grateful. And Chris, you remember we had said to the family, because they were so spiritually inclined, we said to them in our last conversation with them, ask her to help. Remember one of the last things I said to them at the end? Yeah, and one of the last things I said to them at the end of that show was, Remember that to a Christian, because they're Christian, the day that Rachel died is her real birthday. Sure enough, on her birthday, the case breaks, and the cop comes out and says, the officer comes out and says, it was like divine intervention. And I would like to think that in that second, the family members who were there remembered what was said.
You know, and that's a lot of things that we haven't shared in front of the camera. You know, we work with a lot of families behind the scenes. We're victim focused. You know, we just don't talk about it. Okay? We are actually engaged with the families behind the scenes, and we were honored. In fact, that morning when he was captured, you know, the family reached out, sent me a text and said, hey, they got him. And I kept it under my hat, you know, like anything else. But, you know, that's coming to the table with receipts here on TIR. You know, if you want the best in true crime on YouTube, you've come to the best channel. Yep. And, you know, the best people. Hit the subscribe button, please. And if not, that's okay. We understand that too. Okay. But I want to finish here. So August 5th, he attacks her. She's deceased. The 17th of August, which is 12 or 15 days later, no, 12 days later, they get his DNA match from the LA case. The doorbell video gives the guy, you know, shows him leaving, and that's released to the public. And that's always important to understand as well, that they held back a little, but this was a piece of evidence they needed to let into the environment. I didn't understand why they held the hat. I talked to a captain at, you know, LAPD, and I verified some things. You guys remember all of that. And when I went and I said it, I said, look, this guy also has a hat. It's interesting. He was wearing the exact same hat, different color. Okay? A leopard does not lose its spots. So had they put that in the environment early, maybe he was walking around Maryland with that yellow hat and not the red one that was captured in LA. Because obviously he went out and he bought another one, and it's a carbon copy of the two. That said, that was just my critique. You know, still, again, love the fact that they got him, and that's no big deal.
Right. And
DNA test, go ahead.
No, well, okay. So I'm just going to say, let's be grateful that there was no assault on the 9-year-old in that house. And I will tell you that I thought, and I've been discussing it with colleagues that you and I both know privately because it is so extraordinary. I saw something in the news today I never thought I was going to see in my entire career, which is that today the state of Louisiana, it was announced, became the first state in the union where you could be physically castrated for assaulting a child younger than 13 years old. And it's for very special crimes, like very particular crimes like incest, you know, and SA against someone younger than 13. That is extraordinary. I don't know if the Supreme Court is going to hold it, if it's going to hold up, because it's a kind of, arguably a kind of cruel and unusual punishment. But this, we are not talking about chemical castration. We're talking about physically castrating someone to prevent them ever assaulting a child that young again. I have to say, I wondered if everyone in our audience heard about that. But it also, as I understand their law, has provisions about if somebody is here illegally, if I understood it on quick read. And that's also kind of interesting. But we'll see what happens. But the amazing thing is, Chris, that the audience seems to think it's a terrific law.
Well, you know, I'll tell you this, Dr. Gary, I'll tell you what's cruel and unusual is doing that to a child.
Well, that's just it. I understand. But
the Supreme Court, you know, and I don't want to get into, and I hope it's
just think it's an amazing moment in law that absolutely. I never thought I'd ever hear about. I mean, that's really pretty amazing, unbelievable. Chris, what were you going to say, Josh?
I was just saying, I don't know if it's enough.
Well, Chris, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, it's a remarkable law. I'm not saying what I feel about it. I'm only saying I'm shocked.
No, I understand. The legislators over there, we're seeing things, I think, even in our lifetimes that none of us have ever seen like this. And, extreme crime and violence, the legislators are going to create these extreme, barriers to entry potentially. But, I never would have thought in all of my world, look at California, they just redefined what marriage is again. Okay. You can marry anybody you want. They just did this. The legislation in California. And Josh, I know you're from Cali, but you should pull a Beverly Hillbillies and pack up and start heading, bro. Because, just think about that. If you want to marry your cousin, you marry your cousin. You want to marry a dog, you marry a dog. It's just all of this stuff. They just revamped Proposition 8 in California. And I think that's in line with what you're saying, Gary. Okay? That these legislators are going to the extreme. And you're right. I never thought it would get to this place. And my gosh, I mean, where are we headed as a society? Where are we headed just think about YouTube, how much people just throw anything they want at you on YouTube, and you have to sit there and go, okay, I've never met that guy or that gal or that person, but maybe I'll run into him, one day and say, hi, hey, I understand you have a problem with me. It's just like this psychotic release of energy into the world, I think, breeds the kind of stuff that you're talking about, where it's like, okay, well, we can't figure out how to stop it, so let's just castrate them.
I mean, well, look, I mean, I'm talking about, there are, if I remember from the article, 2,244, I think that's the number. I think it's 2,224 people who meet the criteria in Louisiana for this castration, but you have to have committed the crimes after a certain date. I think it's August 1st coming up. So these people are spared that cruel and unusual punishment by one definition, by other people's definition, not enough. After August 1st, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, is that a deterrent? I don't know, but that's pretty bad. And when they say castration, I assume they're talking about the testicles. So the idea would be that you are, that you would theoretically lose your interest in sexual things. That would be the idea. And someone does ask the interesting question about female offenders regarding definitions of marriage and all that thing. I mean, look, I want to ask you a question professionally. Okay, you see hundreds and hundreds of clients. Okay, I know you can't talk about any of them. You never would. I know that. I know that for a fact. Okay, but have you seen a shift in the tide coming through the door? There is I would say, and this is part of what we talk about in The New Evil, is that there is something happening to the average individual, particularly in the Western world, where the average person seems to have a little bit more of a coarseness and a kind of a narcissism, or a kind of a self-absorption. And I don't know what that's about, but there's no denying it. And that change in the personality of the average individual has had an effect on crime. There is this weird overlap. It's not really weird, but there's an overlap between technologies that are new and the audacity of the average individual, that when you put them together creates what Michael Stone and I call new evil. And so you get crimes that simply couldn't have existed before the technology came around. And you get crimes that are committed by the types of people you never would have expected before, and for motives that are outrageous. And in that sense, I think the average person really is changing. And so now the stuff that used to be front page news is now, page 17 on a Tuesday because it's so common. I mean, I found a article, for example, buried in a newspaper recently, little tiny article. And the article said, and I'm not going to remember all the details, but it was something like this. A man went with two women that I think were massaged. They were giving a massage in a hotel. And he was unhappy with how it went. So he bound them together, heated up the iron that they give you in the hotel room to press your clothing, and repetitively singed them with it, and then proceeded to torture them in other ways for his amusement, and left. And that was like buried in the newspaper. 40, 50 years ago, that would have been front page news because it would have been, one of the most outrageous things that people had heard of. For now, it's buried story. And if that's what you mean about changing, the coarsening, the desensitization, yeah, I think that's happening. Regarding changes to, things like people's openness to the question of identity and gender and sex and whatever, that I think gets into religious and political issues. I will sort of leave them there for people. There are going to be people in the audience that have very different opinions on those things. But I think in terms of crime, there is no question that something is happening to the culture. And the other thing is you add in a lot. Yeah, something's happening to the culture, and it is making. There are crimes that are happening now that just didn't happen before. One thing that's been very disturbing to me, for example, as someone who studies criminology and works with offenders, is that you're seeing a lot more women who are committing atrocities like men alone committed for a very long time. Prior to the 1960s, you could count on a single hand the number of women who committed serial murder, maybe two hands, right? Now, it's not that there are a few. They're sprinkled in there. It's still mostly male, but there are females. There are females that are now committing things like outrageous dismemberment, unbelievable abuse of children, etc. And so you have to say, what the heck is that about? What's going on culturally, right? And there are a lot of things like that we could talk about. And Chris, I always say, and it's a point I'm including in the manuscript of the book I'm writing, is I've seen such diversity in crime at this point that I cannot go into a hardware store without being able to think of an offense that was committed with any item you point to. Literally. And that's the best way for me to explain it to someone. If someone says, what about that? They point to a microwave. I'll tell them about the case of China Arnold, or they'll point to a saw, or they'll point to the nails, or they'll point to I can tell you a case. And that tells you something. I mean, the inventiveness of people is unbelievable. And that is why, I have to say, I've always resented when people compare people who do these things to animals, because the reality is that animals don't do things like that. Animals kill quickly and instinctively, and there's no cruelty involved, right? If an animal could, even if it could, it wouldn't tie a person up to a stretch rack, or to put a person in a kind of an Iron Maiden or something like that. Those are things that require the inventiveness of people. And unfortunately, when you expand the palette of what a cruel person can do with technology and with instruments and with whatever, things can get worse for that reason too. Chris, we could do 5 shows alone on the crimes invented with the invention of the internet.
Oh yeah,
right.
What was interesting is years ago at the Museum of Man in Balboa Park in San Diego, they had a torture exhibit.
Yeah.
During the Spanish Inquisitions, etc. Right, going back in.
Yeah, that's what Michael and I were going to write about before he passed away. We were beginning to talk about writing a book on medieval torture. And
oh my gosh, right? Just when you think, holy cow! And when you mentioned tonight, the punishment in Louisiana, I mean that my first impression was to go back to that exhibit that I spent hours in, trying to understand what is it in the human condition that would even, and I often think about, and I know this is a religious philosophy, but it's my opinion, I often think about that soldier who was selected to beat Christ and who was selected, with the whip, because remember, they used to put shards of bone through leather on
like
those whips.
tails and things.
Yeah. And when they would beat them. And then when you see those types of exhibits, and then of course in our life, it's real life, okay, because you see what the human spirit is capable of. And then you hear, you turn on the TV or you turn on the internet, where we're going, right? And all of a sudden, it's like all these people are circling around going, well, but you don't understand. You don't know, you don't this, you don't that. And it's like, yeah, we do. And by the way, you have no idea what the human spirit's capable of. I mean, you can talk about it all day long.
Oh, yeah.
But you've never seen it. You've never been in that room, okay, when somebody has been cut into multiple pieces and placed all over the room. Okay, until they have, hey, great, I'll listen to them.
Yeah.
Okay? But if they haven't, they're part of the problem of our society, because as Jigsaw John asked me that big question, are you teachable? And I said, I paused, and you guys know the story. My chat knows the story. Our channel knows the story. And I had to humble myself and say, yeah, I am teachable. What do you got? And that guy taught me more because he spent 43 years as a homicide detective with LAPD. That guy taught me more in an hour than I learned in 13 years in homicide, working over 300 murders. And like Vernon, I mean, NYPD, 8,000 murders under his belt. If you don't sit there and say, wow, okay.
I think I can learn a thing or two from this guy. Yeah, you have to be humbled by that. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, even from Josh, because he's in his late 30s. I don't want to tell your age, Josh, but
I'm really sensitive about it.
But from your generation with the internet, and now, Dr. Brucato and myself, he's younger than me. So, you're the pup in the room, Dr. Brucato's second, and I'm the old guy. Take that, America.
Methuselah.
Yeah.
Chris is so old he doesn't leave fingerprints anymore.
I love it. Yeah, exactly.
Chris is so old, his favorite race car driver's Ben-Hur.
Oh,
hey, I've got good genes. I've got great genes.
The Hopi Indians are walking around saying, how does he do it?
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. And you know what, though? I'm still learning. And that's why I ask the questions. I love to hear different perspectives. I love to hear it. As you two enjoy, somebody get this guy a bag of munchkins, would you? and deliver them, and a corn dog for the guy below me.
I knew that was coming.
No, but I want to hear your perspective, Josh, about what you're seeing with your generation in terms of, are you seeing a shift? Are you feeling a shift?
It's funny because I feel like I'm right on the edge of the generation that, because I have children that are 19 and 20. I had kids very, very young, but I watched the whole social media thing explode. And I think what really is troubling more so is the accessibility to graphic images, pornography. You're desensitizing children at a very, very young age. You're having conversations with children that should not be had with children at a certain age. I've seen it, and it's confusing. It was confusing for my children. It was confusing for me. I come from a I remember pledging allegiance to the flag, and now that's associated with something like North Korea. And it's just, to me, everybody has an issue with almost everything, and the accessibility to information that should not fall into the hands of people who are not ready to deal with that kind of stuff. I mean, Bundy himself would tell you what he would say, it was pornography that triggered me. I don't know, Gary knows much more about any of that than I do, but that these fantasies, you can go and find your fantasy on the internet, and when you become desensitized to that fantasy, then it becomes reality. And then when the reality sets in, people start getting hurt. And Gary, I was going to ask you, are you surprised at the age of this offender?
No, he's right on time, I think, for when you go out and you do what you're going to do. Probably for the first time would have been somewhere in the 20s. I mean, the average age is 26 for a serial killer who's particularly of the sexually motivated type to start. But, the other thing that I think is so dangerous about the internet, and, this point I'm about to make has tentacles that reach even into the true crime community, is the way that a person could manufacture his or her own fame and self-importance. And one of the things that I have discovered and found very disturbing about contemporary times is the elimination in people's minds of the importance of actual expertise. A person could declare oneself an expert, and they're an expert. No humility, no sense to learn from people who actually have more experience, a condescending attitude. And the other thing that I think is very strange in our culture is the tendency to be very confused about who's the offender and who's a victim. There is a tendency in our time to be more concerned about the sob story given by the mugger than the person who got bopped on the head. That's very peculiar to me. And there's a line that, just because a person has been victimized, it doesn't mean the person has a right to go out and be a victimizer. That's very strange. Then, of course, there's the attack on the notion of truth itself, and the idea that authority figures can't know any better than you do, or that science is questionable. Everything is nothing more than an epistemological puzzle, instead of understanding that some things are just true. And so that toying with the truth, that
the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yes, exactly.
And I'll tell you this too.
What's it called, Josh? What's it called?
The Dunning-Kruger effect. It's like a cognitive bias.
That's
people with limited, knowledge of a certain aspect of. Here's the thing too. I've been involved with victim witness since I was a child, and to this day, I'm still involved with victim witness. I have spoken to many families about what I had went through growing up as a child, that their children, these children are, and I see a young me sometimes, where their parents are. But here's the thing. People want to say, well, I'm a victim, not me personally, but they'll say I'm a victim advocate. I know this is what happened to me. And there's people that they know enough about a subject to think that they're right, but they don't know enough about the subject to know when they're wrong. And
they don't have the humility to be wrong.
And I find that it's all over the place. It's an epidemic. Just because you can read Wikipedia and get a sense of something doesn't mean that you have the expertise. I don't have the expertise of a cop, detective like you, Chris, and I don't have the expertise of being a doctor, but I do have the expertise of growing up in a very confused situation due to violence in my life. But here's the other thing. I'm not the victim. My mother, who was killed by my father, is dead. She's the victim. I'm the survivor. I survived. And Was I a victim of my father taking my mother from me? Of course I was, but she doesn't get to live her life. I have got to. I survived. And I'm telling you that everybody wants to win the trauma Olympics. And I'm telling you, it's not worth it. You don't want to be a victim. You want to be a survivor.
Well said. I mean, absolutely well said. You speak with authenticity. You know, as a young boy, for those of you who are new to our channel here, Josh was a young boy and his mother was killed right in front of him by his father. And then he shot his aunt. And that's one of the reasons why Josh and I hit it off in the very beginning. And when I introduced him to Dr. Brucato, Gary was like, I love that guy.
Sure.
That guy's awesome.
Well,
and go ahead, Gary.
Well, look, I mean, your law enforcement experience, which is long and considerable, my clinical and forensic experience, not only in actual clinical work and work with offenders, but also research and contributing to the literature and what's known about these things. And Josh's having been personally touched by these things means that we have authentic experience. Now look at it like this. If you were going to go to a physician and you were choosing between two physicians, one of them is a person who has been given an actual degree, has gone to school for more years than a lot of people, a lot of young people have even been alive, right? Knows their stuff, has focused on an area, encountered thousands of people who are experiencing the same medical condition you are, is bound by rules and regulations and ethics and laws and licensure. And the other option is a person who's simply calling themselves a doctor because they've set up an operating table in their basement and have read maybe a book on medicine in the library and think that they understand it better than the doctor. Now, you might say, well, that's absurd, except that's the equivalency in terms of what you're dealing with where you're getting your true crime information. That's what you want to remember. I think it's wonderful that there's a diverse true crime community, but I think that there needs to be a differential quality where somebody says, somebody could know better than I do. I am deferential to people that are above me, and I've been doing this a long time. And you know what I'm saying? And I think, contrary to what anybody may believe, I strive every day of my life for a kind of humility. I think it's very important. I am not interested in self-aggrandizement at all. Everything that I do it simply because I want to help these people. I was laughing the other day when I went to the John Ray press conference because someone said to me, how much did you make on that press conference? I said, I spent $550 to get there.
Right, Doctor.
Right. I mean, this is a joke to me. So, but it's just something that gets under my skin.
Yeah.
And I think it, you know what I'm saying? And it all is part of this weird time we're living in where one can manufacture one's own identity into anything one wishes. So today, I'm an expert on whatever. And
so people understand behind the scenes, you know, and I mean, let's put it out there. Dr. Brucato was asked to attend that press conference as a level set to reality and information. And if you go watch it, okay, he didn't say or do anything wrong. And I'm going to say that 1,000 times.
I simply said, these are the possibilities and we don't know what you're
right. How frankly, Gary, you said it here. You said it here long before you repeated it out there. But what was interesting about that is, you know, all of a sudden, I love this Dr. Google, diagnosed by Dr. Google showed up. Okay. And it's as if we were the worst people on the earth. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put this up there. Who cares? And because that's just how I am. You know me. I mean, I've been, whatever. But that said, okay. And this is the point I think that we're talking about tonight. because there's going to be a lot of people coming out of the woodwork saying that Victor is a victim. Victor Martinez-Hernandez is a victim. And they're going to lose the reality of Rachel. And what's going to happen there is they are the one victimizing the family. Again, Shannon Gilbert's family got raked through the coals the other night by dragging John Ray through the mud. And this is the kind of, like Josh says, he speaks with authenticity. Okay. Well, that's what I refuse to do here on this channel. I focus on Rachel. You focus on Rachel, Gary. You focus on Rachel, Josh. You focus on Summer. You focus on Sebastian. And the list goes on and on and on. Okay. I don't focus on other creators. I don't have time for that. Okay. Or other grifters. I don't have time for that. Okay.
There are grifters.
Oh, there's a lot of them out there. And of course, I will get called. I always got called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of us.
But go ahead, Josh.
Well, like I said, I have sat in many of rooms with children who lost a parent to violent crimes, and I'll tell them what happened with me, and I've had several children ask me at these official meetings for the victim witness. They say, I miss my parent, the one who, committed the murder. I miss them. Will that ever go away? While they're just looking me in the eye and crying. And I'd say, I just don't know. I don't know if that'll go away. It may or it may not, but the fact of the matter is that you're here, and I look at them and I go, they have such a long road ahead of them, and so many struggles and hurdles that they're going to have to overcome, because I did it myself. I went through it, and it's like I said, it's not, when I tell people about what happened to me and my family, somebody will say, well, I lost my mother to cancer, but it's nothing like what you went through. And I said, we're not comparing, because I didn't go through what you went through, and you didn't go through what I went through. That's not the point of this. The point of it is that we're to have compassion for everybody and the survivors.
And Gary, that's what Beth is saying. She actually defended you in there. So
listen,
yeah.
I have.
And it was great.
Yeah. I mean, look, I still don't understand it, but the point is that when people emote and get angry, they miss points sometimes. I think that the take-home point of that event was no one knows what happened, if anything. As a matter of fact, it can't even be proved firmly that stuff even belonged to her. It could have been stuff that Hoyerman himself was looking at, using her devices. I'm waiting for that information before I make any decision about what happened. I was simply saying, these are the possibilities. It could have no meaning. It could reflect a person who shares the same disturbing interests. It could be somebody who has been groomed or abused and exposed, and where things are normalized. Or, it could be, it could be something that isn't even in those options. But the point is, my job was simply to say, is it possible? Yeah. Do we have any proof one way or the other? No. But I will tell you, I'm very fond of people who go out on a limb and are the only brave one who says, let's ask a difficult question. And the way that I saw it was that I thought the public would understand that what John was trying to do is say, maybe we need to ask questions about the notion of a double life. That's it. That was his point, right? And he said, if these things belong to somebody, aren't they worth thinking about? That's all he was trying to do. But unfortunately, this is part of the time we're living in, there's that emoting and that impulsive interpretation and the inability to take in a challenging thought that's uncomfortable. And the next thing you know, the guy's being hung out to dry. And because I stood next to someone who had an idea, which I didn't say I committed to or not, I'm guilty by association. But of course, the whole anger that people had was that a person can't be guilty by association with their parent. So if the guilty
Professional
by
victims,
association theory should apply all around.
professional victims will always be offended by anything.
And people have a right to be offended by whatever they wish. I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm only saying if anyone actually listens, I did nothing that was problematic.
No, and if we talk about,
but they'll distort it. Yeah,
if we talk about it in the context of Rachel here,
yeah.
Okay, the family now, in my opinion, YouTube is going to shift from supporting Rachel to finding reasons why they should support this guy.
Well,
And that's
be a soft story.
and I'm going to make that prediction right now.
Right.
Okay. And that's, I guess, what we're talking about in context of her death. We, as a YouTube community and chat, I love our chat because the people that come here are intellectual. They get it. They understand, positioning where they're from. There's a lot more people in this chat that can teach us something because they have been victims of crime, etc. And this is what I hope we get more of, and why we even raise these issues into the YouTube environment. People are going to use this as content. Okay, great. Good for you. Get your own. Okay, go out there, get the experience. My experience came one victim at a time times 299 for a total of 300. Okay, go out, get some experience, and then come back and talk on YouTube about these kind of things. If not, okay, you've got to put yourself in a humble place and say, you know what? I don't understand everything. And guess what? I'm not going to opine about that for likes, clicks, or whatever, which, by the way, you guys always accuse us of doing. Okay. Which, I have no interest in that. Trust me. Okay. I have a full-time job. I have a retirement, and I'm still helping victims of crime. What are you doing on a daily basis? I love the fact that in Minneapolis, the media asked the chief up there years ago, why you didn't do something. And he says, because I'm standing here talking to you as a 4-year-old little girl just got murdered. You're wasting my time. Okay. I absolutely love that response. And what's going to happen now with this guy, Martinez, and I said it and I'm going to repeat it. People are going to turn. They're going to turn their focus on this guy some on YouTube. Here's my suggestion. Get off of YouTube, because you're doing more damage to society than you are helping. Just get off of social media, go back where you need to be, and just let it be, okay? Because you're hurting the people that count. And let me give you a perfect example. Here's what mom said, Patty Morin. That's really brazen to stay in the state when he committed the crime. Morin's mother, Patty Morin, told Fox News Digital. It amazes me. It also amazes me that his family didn't see the flyers we posted. Oh my gosh. Okay. She's trying to make sense of everything going on. Like Bethany is trying to make sense in the Koberger case, like the other roommates trying to make sense in the Koberger case. Okay. We're not out here to solve crimes, people. Okay. That's not YouTube's responsibility. Okay. Or the true crime community. Okay. And if you think you are, okay, then, you need to put yourself in check. Okay. That's why the authorities are out there doing it. All we're here is to tell the story, and it has to be accurate. It has to be accurate. Remember, we talked about how they're going to fly this guy back? And then Gary, you said he'd probably be a weasel. You're right. I used to fly these all the time, we'd go pick up prisoners around the country. The San Diego has a aviation unit for U.S. Customs Border Patrol. There's your guy.
There's a good example, Chris, of somebody who imagined himself to be something other than what he is. That's the whole thing. That manufacturing of fantasy self. Look really.
And you know what's interesting about him? He's changed his appearance. So his hair's grown out. There's your boy. This guy is a serial killer, and hopefully you're not going to be part of his fan club.
Well, the people that are going to have a strange sympathy for him when the sob story comes out about what happened.
Look how he grew his hair out.
See, Chris, it's possible there are people who do horrendous things who did have rough lives, but there are a lot of people who have rough lives that don't go out and take it out on people. And that's the part that you have to remember. A person could simultaneously be wounded and commit great evil. It's all a matter of how a person handles it, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the good thief and the bad thief.
Sorry, Josh, I'm covering you. I didn't mean to do that.
Remember the good thief and the bad thief?
Yeah. Yeah, right.
All right. It's a matter of perspective and what a person sees in what one has done, right? And how a person handles that. And one person says, remember the whole story of the good thief and the bad? Well, the one crucified to the left and the right of
yeah.
Well, there's a lot to learn from those two.
I agree.
Because remember, one of them literally stole paradise.
Yep.
With one sentence.
Yep. Yep. What are you doing here? You know, and the other one says stop. Okay. At least, you know, we've done something. And the Lord turned to him and says, today thou shalt find thyself in paradise. And the other guy's going, what about me? Oops.
Hey, Chris, you said something earlier about the people that were chosen to carry out the acts on Christ himself, like the Roman soldiers that nailed him to the cross. And I've always wondered if they were forgiven because Jesus asked his Father to forgive them because they had no idea what they were actually doing. And I mean, isn't that a pardon?
Yeah, I mean, we could get into hours on that, and we do that on the witness box for everybody, so you know.
Yeah, you just broached it. I thought it was an interesting thought.
You know, because, you know, in YouTube, I had somebody even the other day saying, are you seriously talking about Jesus? And I responded, yes. You know, wow. And I'm going to continue to talk about him. I mean, I just went through cancer, and, you know, here I am, you know, talking about the Savior, and I will never, ever apologize for doing that. So, you know, unfortunately, and you may love Buddha, you may love Muhammad, you may love, you know, any universal God that you believe in, I support you. You know, if it's Yahweh, if you're Jewish, I support you. I love everybody. Yeah. Okay, I do. I try. I know Gary does, and I know Josh. We try. Am I perfect? Heck no. Do I make mistakes? Yep. Just ask Karen. Okay? Get in line. Okay. But do I try to stick people in the eyes? You know, no. I put the curly shuffle up, and like, you know, Mo and Curly, remember, where they would poke him between the eyes, and he'd have his hand up there, and you can't get to him. Okay. You're going to love the witness box, everybody. You're going to absolutely love it. And you know what? This is a safe space for people to express their religious belief system. I'm good with that personally. And thank goodness people still have a faith of some sort. Okay? And
well, Chris, you and I both know, and Josh knows, if people want to ridicule us for that, we'll just dance for joy.
Okay. Absolutely. And you know, remember in the book, The Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. Of course. And I know you know it more than anybody, Gary.
I know it.
I love the story when Dr. Frankl is asked to come over, and the one lady, the elderly lady, she's up against the Quonset hut. There's a very small pinhole. And she goes, Victor, come back. And he's like, what? And she goes, look, he's back. And Victor's like, who's back? And I'm paraphrasing the story, but you can read the book, you guys yourself. It's called A Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl. Okay. And he's looking, and in the distance is a tree with one leaf that had blossomed and bloomed. And she looks at him and says, Victor, he's back. Now think about the depth of that trauma that woman had laid in that position at least a year to see that leaf come back on that tree. That is the power of the human condition. And then when we think about the power of that condition, think about the evil it took to put her in that position, in that camp. And I think that's what we strive for here on this channel and in our individual lives. And I know you each try to strive for that. Okay? But and that's where I say, please, let's just be a little bit kinder and a little bit nicer to one another. And you know what? It resonates. When I saw what people were saying about my friend over there, which was completely unjustified and taken out of context.
Yes.
I thought to myself, if you only knew this man, if you only knew who he is and what he's all about. He wrote this book. And guess what? It has the word evil on it. Can you imagine? Imagine understanding what this is all about. And that's why I tell people right up front, if you've written a book like this, you'd be more than glad to talk about it, and at least send me a copy and I'll invite you on the show. If you haven't, okay, then why are you just living up to what this book is all about? From that man, it doesn't make sense, because when you see guys like this, thank goodness we have guys like that.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you, Chris, to say that. The fact is, evil is a 4-letter word, in 2024. But look, I remember a very, very great man, Robert Johnson, the Jungian therapist, very wonderful writer, told the story that when he was living in a certain part of India, and which he did at length, he was told by the locals that it was common when you were in distress to walk up to a stranger on the street and say to them, "Will you be the incarnation of God for me today?" And that person could say yes or no. And if they said yes, they would help you in any way you needed. And he tells the story that one day he was in very great distress. He stopped a man randomly on the street. He said, "Will you be the incarnation of God for me today?" And that man said yes. Sat with him about 2 hours, listened to all his pains and troubles and everything. And it turned out by sheer coincidence that man was a Roman Catholic priest who didn't happen to be wearing a collar. And he never got over that story. Anyway, I always think about that story, about the idea that anybody who comes into my life, your life, Josh's life, all of our lives, no matter who they are, even if they're a person who's criticizing you and hating you or spitting on you or needs you or is crying to you, you have to ask yourself, how am I being a little bit of God to them now? And as a consequence, listen, we get angry at injustice. We get angry at the way that good and evil have swapped places and been wrapped up in bows and lies to people. We become horrified at the things that happen in this world, even though we know that one day they'll be wiped away and there won't be any more tears. and we know, ultimately we try to care about people. And that was, I think, the sting, Chris, of what bothered me about that whole story, which fortunately now has, time is sort of coming between it, and people are giving it more thought, and I think understanding a little bit more what was actually intended there. But if there is one thing in this world I cannot abide, it's being mistaken for someone who doesn't care about the victims and other people more than himself. If someone asks me how I am, I don't even know the answer. I haven't thought about it. I don't remember. And so it's very, very, it's that I think there are very few things in this world as painful as being misunderstood in one's intentions. And when a person strives every day to be harder on themselves than anyone could possibly be on them, it's very heartbreaking for such a person to be misinterpreted. And but Chris, I think the take-home point of this entire conversation is it happened to God. He took a taste of his own medicine. It wasn't understood, right?
Jesus was betrayed by his best friend.
Right.
He was charged with a crime that he didn't commit. He was prosecuted for it. He was exchanged with a murderer. I mean, it doesn't get any more horrific and misunderstood. Imagine the betrayal and the persecution and that Jesus went through. The story just itself, even if you don't believe Jesus is God, the story itself is one of the most heartbreaking stories you'll ever hear.
And it's worse than it even seems because of what we know historically about. I mean, for example, we know from historically that we picture the crucifix, the cross, as being very tall and above us. But the reality is that they were quite short, so that people could smear the victim.
They were crosses, actually. They were like X's.
Or right. And
that was for the worst of the worst.
Right. And people would smear you with their feces and urine and everything else. It was about as humiliating as it could get.
Yes.
And I think that, I always remember that beautiful line from my favorite of all the Gospels, John, that says, "The light shone in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not." That's the whole thing. And I think if you go into the world, and this is true of everyone here in the audience, if you go into the world and you try to do good, it is almost by design that people are going to hate you because they don't recognize what you're doing. They think that you're a weirdo or a stranger or you're bad or whatever. And so I think, if you're trying to do good, expect that a lot of people aren't going to understand it. It's like you're speaking in gibberish in the time we're living in. And I think it's an important piece of advice for people in the audience. Don't worry so much because in the end it'll all get sorted out.
And isn't that a true statement? And you know what's where we are in the battle of good and evil, and we have been.
That's right.
My battle started years ago. Your battle started years ago, Josh. Your battle started years ago. Everybody in this chat has a Gethsemane. Every single one of us. And we just hope that this place here, that you find this a place of safety, a place of expression where you can express your opinion, but also a place of kindness. And, it's okay to disagree. We don't mind any of that, but we just want, the folks that come over here to just be good people to one another. There's enough hate out there. There's enough of these guys out there. And you won't hear this on any other true crime channel. You will not hear what we're talking about tonight on any true crime channel. And so if you appreciate it, please smash that subscribe button, because that helps us give you more content going forward as well. And, you know, this guy here, I'm just so grateful that they got him. And now let's watch him put him in the car. And once he's in the car, as is our tradition, we'll go to Hawaii. And also keep Teresa and her family in your prayers, please. They need them. Those doors hopefully won't be opening anytime in the near future, ever again. God bless you, Rachel, and your family. We're so sorry.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts. Wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah. Make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away. You and me go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.